This story follows the emotional journey of Dolores Ainsworth, a 74-year-old widow who experiences betrayal from her son after her husband's death leaves her with an $18 million inheritance. When her estranged son suddenly reappears after 7 years with documents for her to sign, Dolores must navigate complex emotions while protecting herself from manipulation. Through heartbreak and difficult decisions, this tale explores family bonds, forgiveness, and the courage to stand up for oneself even against those we love. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. The afternoon sun streamed through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor my Lawrence had installed himself 30 years ago. I was 74 now, and the house seemed too big, too quiet since he'd passed 4 months ago. I ran my fingertips along the counter, feeling the smooth granite beneath my weathered hands. Lawrence and I had built a beautiful life together over 51 years of marriage. We'd raised our son, Adrian, in this house in Rosewood, Connecticut. We'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings here. We'd fought and loved and grown old together within these walls. But Adrian hadn't been back in 7 years. Not since that terrible fight. "You're useless." His words still cut through me like glass. "Dad made all the money, and you've just been riding his coattails your whole life." I could still see his face, contorted with rage as he'd shouted those words at me. I'd been trying to suggest he stop gambling, that the debts he was accumulating would destroy his marriage to Jessica. Instead of listening, he'd exploded, saying things I never thought a son could say to his mother. Lawrence had been devastated. He'd tried to talk to Adrian, to mend the rift, but our son had cut us both off entirely. No calls, no visits. The holidays became quieter. Family photos stayed frozen in time, with Adrian perpetually 37. Now, at 74, I spent my days in solitude, watering the garden Lawrence had loved and volunteering at the local library. My friends Meredith and Patricia checked on me, bringing casseroles and company, but they couldn't fill the Adrian-shaped hole in my heart. The lawyer had called yesterday. Mr. Harrington, who had handled Lawrence's affairs for decades, informed me that Lawrence's investments had done exceptionally well, better than either of us had realized. The inheritance was substantial, 18 million euros in various accounts and properties, all transferred solely to me. Lawrence was explicit about this. "Dolores," Mr. Harrington had explained, "everything goes to you, with no stipulations." I hadn't even known we had that much. Lawrence had always handled the finances, and I'd never questioned him. We lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. Our modest 3-bedroom home, our annual trips to Maine, our reliable cars, none of it suggested millions. As I stood in my kitchen, the silence was broken by an unexpected sound. The doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. Meredith was visiting her daughter in Phoenix, and Patricia never came on Wednesdays. Curiosity pulled me to the door, and when I opened it, I nearly collapsed. Adrian stood on my porch, looking older than I remembered. At 44, his hair had begun to gray at the temples, and fine lines had formed around his eyes. He held a white bakery box in his hands and wore a smile I didn't trust. "Mom," he said softly, "I think it's time we talked." I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. 7 years of silence, and now here he was, standing on my doorstep as if he'd just been away for the weekend. "Adrian," my voice came out as barely a whisper. His smile widened, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I brought cake," he said, lifting the box slightly. "Your favorite, lemon with raspberry filling." It was indeed my favorite, though I was surprised he remembered, or perhaps Jessica had reminded him. I stepped back, allowing him into the home he'd once stormed out of, declaring he'd never return. "I heard about Dad," he said as he walked past me into the living room. He placed the cake box on the coffee table and turned to face me. "I'm sorry I didn't come to the funeral." I closed the door and followed him, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "You knew about the funeral." He looked down, feigning shame. "Jessica saw the obituary online. By the time we found out, it was the day of, and we were in Colorado for a business trip. A business trip, more important than his father's funeral." I swallowed the bitter retort that rose in my throat. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked instead. "Sure, Mom. That would be great." In the kitchen, I busied myself with the coffee maker, grateful for the moment alone to collect my thoughts. Why now? Why after 7 years of silence? After missing his father's funeral, would he suddenly appear with cake and apologies? When I returned with 2 mugs, Adrian was examining the photos on the mantel. Most were old. Lawrence and me on our 40th anniversary, Adrian's college graduation, family Christmas photos from before the estrangement. No recent pictures of Adrian existed in this house. "Joel, you haven't changed anything," he observed, accepting the coffee. "Some things change whether we want them to or not," I replied, settling into Lawrence's old armchair. "Others, we choose to keep the same." Adrian sat on the sofa across from me, setting a briefcase I hadn't noticed before beside him. He sipped his coffee and studied me over the rim of the mug. "You look good, Mom," he said. Thank you." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. 7 years of unspoken words and built-up resentments couldn't be erased with cake and pleasantries. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Adrian finally said. "About the things I said. I was wrong. Mom. So wrong. Dad's death. It made me realize life is too short for grudges. I wanted to believe him. Every mother wants to believe her child when they claim to have changed, to have seen the error of their ways. But something felt off. Your father tried to reach out to you," I said quietly. "Multiple times over the years. He sent birthday cards, Christmas presents. He called you when he was diagnosed. Adrian had the decency to look ashamed. I know. I was stubborn and proud. I should have answered. I should have come back sooner. Why now, Adrian? Why not 4 months ago, when your father was being lowered into the ground?" He fidgeted with his coffee mug. "I wasn't ready then. The shock of his death. I needed time." Another silence fell between us. I noticed Adrian glancing repeatedly at his briefcase. "I brought something else," he said finally, reaching for it. "Some papers Dad had wanted me to have. Legal documents from his business that got sent to me years ago." He pulled out a folder filled with official-looking papers. "I thought you might want to see them, since they relate to Dad's estate. Maybe sign them, so everything's in order the way Dad wanted." I felt a chill run through me despite the warm coffee in my hands. "What kind of papers?" "Just some transfer documents," Adrian said, sliding them across the coffee table toward me. "Dad had intended for me to have partial ownership of his holdings. I think it's what he would have wanted." The way his eyes darted away as he spoke told me everything I needed to know. "Mr. Harrington didn't mention anything about that," I said carefully. Adrian's expression changed slightly, a flicker of something, annoyance, frustration, crossing his face before he composed himself. "Mr. Harrington might not have had the full picture," he said smoothly. "Dad and I had discussed this years ago, before our disagreement." I picked up the document, noticing how my hands trembled slightly. I'd need my reading glasses to make sense of the legal jargon, but one thing was immediately clear. These papers would give Adrian control over half of Lawrence's estate, half of 18 million euros. "I'll need to review these," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Perhaps have Mr. Harrington look them over." Adrian's smile tightened. "Of course, Mom. Take your time. I'm back now. We have all the time in the world to make things right." But as I looked into my son's eyes, I saw no genuine remorse, no true desire for reconciliation. I saw only the calculation of a man who had learned his father had left behind millions, and had come to claim what he believed was his share. After 7 years of silence, Adrian hadn't returned for me. He'd returned for Lawrence's money. That night, after Adrian had left with promises to return the next day, I sat alone in Lawrence's study. The leather of his chair still held the impression of his body, and his reading glasses lay folded neatly beside the lamp, as if he might walk in any moment to continue the mystery novel he'd been reading before his heart gave out. I spread Adrian's papers across Lawrence's desk and pulled the chain on the lamp. The yellow light illuminated the dense legal text, much of which I couldn't fully comprehend. But certain phrases stood out starkly. Transfer of assets, reallocation of funds, amendment to previous will. It was nearly midnight when I reached for the phone and dialed Mr. Harrington's home number, something I'd never done before. But these were extraordinary circumstances. Dolores. He sounded groggy but quickly alert. "Is everything all right?" "I'm sorry to call so late, Herbert," I said, using his first name for the first time in our decades-long acquaintance. "But Adrian came to visit today." Silence on the line. Then, Adrian returned. With documents he claims Lawrence wanted signed. Documents that would transfer half the estate to him. Mr. Harrington's voice hardened. That's impossible. Lawrence was explicit in his final will, updated just last year. He left everything to you, Dolores, with specific instructions that Adrian was to receive nothing unless you chose to give it to him. My hands tightened around the phone. He brought papers. They look official. They're forgeries, or at best, outdated documents that Lawrence superseded. Don't sign anything, Dolores. I'll come by first thing tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I returned to the papers, examining them more carefully. The dates listed were recent, supposedly signed just weeks before Lawrence's death. But Lawrence had been in the hospital then, barely able to hold a pen. And the signature, I pulled out one of Lawrence's old birthday cards for comparison. Close, but not quite right. The L had an extra flourish, and the W in Ainsworth was too angular. My son had brought me forged documents, planning to trick his 74-year-old mother into signing away 9 million euros. I should have felt anger, outrage even. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me. What had happened to the little boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard? The teenager who'd stayed up all night to finish a Mother's Day painting? The young man who danced with me at his wedding, whispering, "I'll always be your boy, Mom." Lawrence and I had given Adrian everything: love, education, support. When had it become not enough? When had money become more important than family? I carefully gathered the papers and locked them in Lawrence's desk drawer. Then I went to the bedroom I'd shared with my husband for over 50 years and wept into his pillow, which still faintly smelled like his aftershave. Morning came with pale sunlight and the sound of birds outside my window. I'd barely slept, but a strange clarity had settled over me. I knew what I needed to do. Mr. Harrington arrived at 9, briefcase in hand and concern etched on his face. After examining Adrian's documents, he confirmed what I already suspected. These are clever forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless, he said, removing his glasses. This is serious, Dolores. What Adrian is attempting is fraud. What should I do? Mr. Harrington hesitated. Legally, we should report this to the police. This is a criminal attempt to defraud you. The thought of my son in handcuffs made my chest tighten. And the alternatives? You confront him. Make it clear you know what he's trying to do. But Dolores, he leaned forward. Be careful. People desperate for money can be unpredictable. After Mr. Harrington left, I sat in the kitchen, watching the clock tick toward noon. When Adrian had said he would return, I made a fresh pot of coffee and cut 2 slices of the lemon cake he'd brought, the cake I hadn't touched yesterday. At precisely 12 AB, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress and walked calmly to the door. "Good morning, Adrian," I said, opening it wide. "The coffee's ready, and I've been looking at those papers you brought." His smile was eager as he stepped inside. "Great. I've got a notary friend who can come by this afternoon if you're ready to sign." "I thought we might discuss them first," I said, leading him to the kitchen where the cake and coffee waited. "There are some details I'm not clear on." Adrian's confident stride faltered slightly. "Of course, Mom. What questions do you have?" I gestured for him to sit, then placed a slice of cake before him. I remained standing, my hands steady on the back of the chair across from him. "First, I'd like to know when your father supposedly signed these papers. According to the date, he would have been in the intensive care unit, barely conscious." Adrian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "He had good days, Mom. You might not remember. I was there every day, Adrian, every hour. There were no good days when he could have met with lawyers." A flush crept up my son's neck. "Maybe the date is wrong. These things get mixed up." "And the signature," I continued, my voice still calm. "It's close, but not quite right. Your father's WN was always more rounded." Adrian set down his fork, his expression hardening. "But what exactly are you suggesting, Mom?" I looked at my son, my only child, my flesh and blood, and said the hardest words I'd ever spoken. "I'm suggesting that you forged these documents to steal from me, Adrian, to take money your father explicitly didn't want you to have." Adrian's face transformed, the pleasant mask slipping away to reveal something colder underneath. "You've always thought the worst of me," he said, pushing the cake away. "Even now, when I'm trying to make amends." "Amends don't come with forged documents," I replied, finally taking a seat across from him. "If you wanted to reconnect, you could have just come. No cake needed, no papers to sign." He laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. And what would that have gotten me? A nice mother-son reunion while you sit on a fortune. The baldness of his admission startled me, even though I'd suspected it. So you did know about the inheritance. Of course I knew. Dad's old assistant Marjorie still keeps in touch with Jessica. She mentioned the estate value after he died. His eyes narrowed. 18 million euros. Mom and Dad left me nothing. He left it to me to decide. I corrected him. If I thought you deserved it. Adrian's jaw tightened. After everything I've done, I built my own business from nothing. I gave you a grandson I haven't seen since he was 10. I interjected. A grandson who probably barely remembers me. That's your fault. You and Dad with your constant judgment, your suggestions about how I should live my life. If you'd just stayed out of my business. We were trying to help you, I said, feeling an old anger resurface. You were gambling away Jessica's savings. You remortgaged your house without telling her. That was between me and my wife. And now? I asked. Is Jessica still your wife? Adrian's silence told me everything. When did she leave? I asked more gently. He stared into his coffee. 2 years ago. Took Thomas with her. They're in Seattle now. Despite everything, my heart ached for him. For my grandson. Growing up without his father present. I'm sorry, Adrian. I don't need your pity, he snapped. What I need is what's rightfully mine. Half of Dad's estate should have come to me. You know it, and I know it. I shook my head. Your father updated his will last year. He knew exactly what he was doing. Adrian's hand slammed down on the table, making the coffee cups jump. Because you poisoned him against me. You always had him wrapped around your finger. That's not true, I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart raced. Your father loved you until his last breath, but he was also protecting you. Protecting me, Adrian scoffed. From what? Having enough money to restart my life. From yourself, I said simply. Lawrence watched his own brother destroy himself with inherited wealth. He didn't want the same for you. Adrian stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm his son, his only child. That money should be mine. I remained seated, looking up at my son towering over me. How like his father he looked in that moment. The same strong jaw, the same intensity in his eyes. But Lawrence had never directed such fury at me. I'm not signing those papers, Adrian. They're forgeries, and we both know it. His face contorted with rage. You'll regret this, Mom. I'm not leaving empty-handed. Are you threatening me? I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Adrian stepped back, seeming to realize he'd gone too far. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Lawrence's that it made my heart clench. I'm just saying you should think carefully about this, he said, his tone moderated but still hard. I'm your son, your only family now. Family doesn't try to defraud family, I replied. Family doesn't disappear for 7 years and return only for money. Adrian grabbed his briefcase, slamming the forged papers inside. This isn't over. I'll be back. And next time I'll bring real lawyers, not some ancient family friend who's probably half senile. Herbert Harrington is sharp as ever, I said, and he's already seen your forgeries. Adrian froze halfway to the door. You showed him. This morning. He suggested I call the police. The color drained from Adrian's face. You wouldn't, would I? Could I report my own son for fraud? Potentially sending him to prison? The answer came more easily than I expected. I don't want to, I said truthfully. But if you push this, Adrian, if you try to take what your father wanted me to have, I will do whatever I need to protect myself. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not as the mother who had always yielded, always forgiven, but as a woman who would stand her ground. We'll see about that, he said finally, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat motionless at the kitchen table, listening to his car engine roar to life and the tires squeal as he pulled away. The silence he left behind was deafening. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and dialed Mr. Harrington again. He didn't take it well, I said when he answered. I need to know what he might do next, and how I can protect myself. I'll be right over, Mr. Harrington replied. And Dolores? I think it's time we discuss changing your locks. After hanging up, I glanced at the half-eaten cake and 2 coffee cups. Such ordinary objects to witness the final fracturing of a family. I gathered them up and washed them carefully. each movement deliberate and focused. Because if I allowed myself to think too much about what had just happened, about the hatred I'd seen in my son's eyes, I feared I might shatter completely. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. I changed the locks, as Mr. Harrington suggested, and installed a simple security system. Adrian didn't return, but his absence felt different now, no longer the void of someone who had chosen to stay away, but the threatening emptiness of someone who might return at any moment, with unpredictable intentions. I called Jessica, my former daughter-in-law, despite not having spoken to her in years. Her voice was guarded when she answered. "Dolores? Is everything all right?" I explained briefly about Adrian's visit, his forged documents, his anger when confronted. "I'm not surprised," she said after a long pause. "That sounds like the Adrian I left. Always looking for the easy solution, the quick money." She sighed. "He's been living in a motel the past year. Lost his business. Has some gambling debts again, I think." "How is Thomas?" I asked, eager to hear about my grandson. Her voice softened. "He's 16 now, tall like his dad. Smart. He wants to study engineering. He asks about you sometimes." My heart swelled. "He remembers me." "Of course. He was 10, not 2, when everything fell apart. He remembers his grandparents." I clutched the phone tighter. "Jessica, would it be possible? Could I speak to him sometime?" The silence that followed felt endless. But finally, she said, "I think he'd like that. I'll talk to him, have him call you this weekend." After hanging up, I sat in Lawrence's study, surrounded by the books he'd loved and the photographs of the family we'd been, thinking about Thomas. 16 years old now, almost a man. I'd missed so much of his life, his first heartbreak, his driver's license, his growing into himself, all because of a rift that had seemed unbridgeable. It was there, in Lawrence's chair, that I made a decision. Adrian had returned only for money, but perhaps something good could still come from this mess. Perhaps I could rebuild a relationship with my grandson, even if the one with my son was beyond repair. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Anxiety surged through me. Had Adrian returned? I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. Not Adrian, but a young woman I didn't recognize, professionally dressed with a leather portfolio under her arm. "Mrs. Ainsworth," she called through the door. "My name is Vanessa Chambers. I'm an attorney representing Adrian Ainsworth. I have some papers to discuss with you." My first instinct was not to open the door, but hiding wouldn't solve anything. I checked that the security chain was in place, then opened the door a crack. "Mr. Harrington handles my legal affairs," I said. "You should speak with him." The young woman smiled pleasantly. "This is a simple matter, Mrs. Ainsworth. Your son is prepared to drop his claim to his father's estate for a one-time settlement of 4 million euros. It's quite generous, considering he could contest the will and potentially tie up the entire inheritance in court for years." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "Not at all. It's merely an observation of legal reality." She tried to hand a document through the crack in the door. "This settlement offer is open for 48 hours. After that, we'll be forced to proceed with a formal contest of Lawrence Ainsworth's will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity." Lawrence, diminished? The man who had completed the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning until the week he died. Who had managed his investments with meticulous attention, even from his hospital bed. "Yeah, my husband was of sound mind when he updated his will," I said firmly. "And there was no undue influence. He made his decisions for reasons he explained to me and to Mr. Harrington." Ms. Chambers' smile didn't waver. "Courts often side with children in these matters, Mrs. Ainsworth, especially when there's such a substantial estate involved. It could be a lengthy, expensive process." She pushed the paper forward again. "And 4 million euros is a fair compromise." I didn't take the document. "Please leave my property, Mrs. Chambers. Any further communication should go through Herbert Harrington at Harrington, Willis, and Beck." Her smile finally faltered. "Mrs. Ainsworth, I strongly advise." "Good day," I said, and closed the door. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time, from anger. Adrian was escalating, moving from forged documents to legal threats, using Lawrence's mental capacity as a weapon, when my husband had been sharp until his last days. I called Mr. Harrington immediately, relaying the encounter. "It's a bluff," he assured me after I'd explained. "Adrian doesn't have grounds to contest the will. Lawrence was examined by 2 separate physicians before signing the updated will specifically to prevent this kind of challenge, and we have years of documentation showing his consistent intent regarding the distribution of his assets. But she said courts often side with children. Sometimes they do, Mr. Harrington admitted, but not when the will is as ironclad as Lawrence's. Not when we have video documentation of him explaining his decisions in his own words. I paused. Video documentation. Lawrence recorded a statement when he updated the will. He anticipated Adrian might try something like this if he learned about the money. The video is in my office safe. A wave of gratitude for my husband's foresight washed over me. Even after death, Lawrence was protecting me. So what do we do? I asked. Nothing, Mr. Harrington said firmly. Don't respond to the settlement offer. Don't engage. If Adrian files a formal contest, we'll respond then, with all our evidence. But my guess, he's bluffing, hoping you'll panic and pay him off. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the street outside. Part of me wondered if Adrian was out there somewhere, watching the house, waiting for a sign of weakness. The boy I'd raised would never have done this. Somewhere along the way, something had gone terribly wrong. Had it been our fault? Mine and Lawrence's? Had we been too indulgent or not indulgent enough? Had we missed some crucial moment when we could have guided him onto a different path? Or was it simply who Adrian had chosen to become? A man who would threaten his elderly mother with a legal battle over money he hadn't earned. Either way, I knew I couldn't give in. Not just because the money was rightfully mine according to Lawrence's wishes, but because giving in to Adrian's demands wouldn't help him. It would only reinforce the idea that intimidation and threats were effective tools to get what he wanted. Lawrence had been trying to protect our son, even in death. Now it was my turn to be strong, not just for myself, but for the Adrian who might still find his way back someday. The Adrian who might yet remember what really mattered. The next morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a young male voice asked hesitantly, "Grandma Dolores." My heart nearly stopped. "Thomas? Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me." His voice had deepened since I'd last heard it, the childish tones replaced by a young man's cadence. "Mom said I should call you. I'm so glad you did," I said, sinking into a chair. "I've missed you so much, Thomas." "I've missed you too." His voice carried a warmth that brought tears to my eyes. "Mom told me about Dad coming to see you, about what he tried to do." I hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of Adrian to his son. "Your father is going through a difficult time. He's been going through a difficult time for years," Thomas replied, a note of bitterness in his voice that sounded far too adult for a 16-year-old. "That's his excuse for everything." "Thomas, it's okay, Grandma. I know what he's like. He hardly ever calls me, and when he does, it's usually to ask Mom for money." He paused. "I remember you and Grandpa, though. I remember the wooden train set Grandpa built for me, and how you used to make those chocolate chip cookies with the orange zest in them. The memory made me smile through my tears. I still make those cookies. Maybe I could try them again sometime." His voice carried a vulnerability that reminded me he was still just a boy, despite his mature words. "I would love that," I said, "more than anything." We talked for nearly an hour. Thomas told me about his school, his interest in robotics, the college programs he was researching. I told him stories about his father as a boy, about Lawrence, about the family history he'd missed. By the time we said goodbye, with promises to speak again soon, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced since before Adrian's return. That afternoon, Mr. Harrington called with news. "Vanessa Chambers contacted our office," he said. "Adrian is withdrawing his settlement demand, but he's escalating in another way. He's claiming you're experiencing cognitive decline and aren't competent to manage your affairs. He's filing for conservatorship." The word hit me like a physical blow. Conservatorship. It's a legal arrangement where the court appoints someone to manage financial affairs for a person deemed incapable of doing so themselves, Mr. Harrington explained, though I already knew what it meant. I'd seen it happen to my friend Eleanor years ago, when her dementia had progressed. "But I'm perfectly capable," I protested. "I balance my checkbook every month. I manage my household. I volunteer at the library, for heaven's sake." "I know, Dolores. This is just another tactic, but we need to take it seriously. Adrian is requesting an emergency hearing, claiming you're at risk of being financially exploited. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. He's the one trying to exploit me. Exactly. And we'll make that clear to the court. But you should prepare yourself. This could get unpleasant. Adrian may try to document any small mistake or memory lapse as evidence of incompetence. After Mr. Harrington hung up, I sat motionless, trying to process this new attack. Adrian wasn't just after Lawrence's money anymore. He was trying to take away my autonomy, my independence, to have himself appointed as the controller of my finances, and, by extension, my life. The phone rang again. This time, it was Adrian. I almost didn't answer, but some maternal instinct made me pick up. Adrian. Mom. His voice was calm, reasonable. I'm guessing Harrington called you. He did. Conservatorship, Adrian? Really? It's for your own protection, he said smoothly. You're 74, living alone. Dad's no longer there to help you manage such a large estate. You need assistance. What I need is for my son to stop trying to take control of money that isn't his. Adrian sighed, as if I were being the unreasonable one. This doesn't have to be adversarial. If you're declared incompetent, which I'm not, then someone has to manage your affairs. It should be family, me, the same son who hasn't spoken to me in 7 years, who forged documents, who threatened legal action. I made mistakes, Adrian admitted, his voice softening. I was angry, but I'm still your son, Mom. I still care about you. For a moment, I almost believed him, almost heard the Adrian I'd raised, the boy who'd once been kind and thoughtful before money and gambling had corrupted him. If you cared about me, I said quietly, you wouldn't be doing this. I'm trying to protect you, he insisted. There are people who might take advantage. Yes, I cut him off. There are, and you're one of them. A long silence followed. When Adrian spoke again, the pretense of concern was gone. Have it your way. We'll let the courts decide if you're competent. I'll be collecting evidence, Mom. Every time you forget something, every time you misplace your keys or repeat a story, it all adds up. The threat chilled me. Is that how you plan to spend your time? Spying on your mother? Hoping to catch her in a senior moment? I'm doing what's necessary, he replied coldly. See you in court. After he hung up, I called Jessica back, my hands shaking. He's filing for conservatorship, I told her, claiming I'm incompetent. Jessica's sigh carried the weariness of someone who had dealt with Adrian's schemes for years. I'm not surprised. It's a common tactic when an elderly parent won't hand over money. Make them look incompetent, get legal control, then do whatever you want with their assets. What should I do? Fight, she said simply, and gather allies, people who can testify to your competence, friends, doctors, the people you volunteer with. And, she hesitated, Thomas and I could come. He could testify about your recent conversations, how sharp you are. Hope flickered in my chest. You would do that? Adrian tried similar tactics with me during our divorce, Jessica said grimly. Claimed I was an unfit mother, that I was mentally unstable, all to get custody of Thomas, which would have meant control of his trust fund from my parents. I know how he operates. After speaking with Jessica, I felt a new resolve forming. Adrian thought I would be an easy target, a grieving widow, isolated and vulnerable. But he had underestimated me. Lawrence and I had built a life together based on mutual respect and partnership. I had been his equal in all things, even if I'd let him take the lead with finances. It was time to show Adrian that I wasn't the fragile old woman he thought I was. Lawrence had always told me I had a spine of steel beneath my gentle exterior. Now I needed to prove him right. I spent the next few days preparing for battle. Mr. Harrington arranged for me to be evaluated by a neurologist who specialized in elder care and cognitive assessment. Dr. Eileen Rashid was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who put me through a battery of tests that examined everything from my memory to my decision-making abilities. Mrs. Ainsworth, she said after we'd finished, based on my evaluation, your cognitive functions are excellent for a person of any age, let alone someone in their 70s. Your short-term memory, problem-solving skills, and executive function show no signs of decline beyond what would be considered normal aging. Relief washed over me. So you'd testify to that? Absolutely. I'll prepare a comprehensive report for your attorney. Dr. Rashid's expression softened. This situation with your son, it must be incredibly painful. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Unfortunately, I see this more often than you might think, she continued. Family members using accusations of incompetence as a way to gain control of assets. It's a form of elder abuse, Mrs. Ainsworth. Elder abuse. The phrase hung in the air, harsh but accurate. My own son was attempting to abuse me, not physically, but legally and emotionally. The good news, Dr. Rashid added, is that courts are becoming more aware of these tactics. Your evaluation results will carry significant weight. After leaving Dr. Rashid's office, I drove to the Rosewood Public Library where I'd volunteered for the past 15 years. Martha Goldstein, the head librarian and my friend of 2 decades, greeted me with concern. "Dolores, what's wrong? You look troubled." Over tea in her office, I explained the situation. Martha's expression grew increasingly outraged. "That's preposterous. You're one of the sharpest people I know. Just last month, you reorganized our entire local history section and created that new digital catalog system. Would you be willing to say that in court?" I asked. "Testify about my work here?" "Of course," Martha said without hesitation. "And I'll get statements from the rest of the staff and the reading group you lead. We'll show this judge exactly who Dolores Ainsworth is." By the end of the week, I had assembled a small army of supporters. My doctor of 30 years, neighbors, friends from church, the financial advisor I'd been consulting since Lawrence's death, and even some of the children whose reading skills I'd helped improve at the library, all willing to testify to my competence and character. The court date was set for 3 weeks away. Mr. Harrington seemed confident, but warned me that Adrian might escalate his tactics as the date approached. "He might try to provoke you," he cautioned, "get you to say or do something he could use against you. Or he might attempt a more sympathetic approach, trying to make you feel guilty or appealing to family loyalty." "I understand," I said. "I won't let my guard down." 2 days later, Adrian proved Mr. Harrington right. He showed up at my door unannounced, this time looking disheveled and distressed rather than polished and confident. "Mom, please," he said, when I opened the door with the security chain still in place. "Can we talk? Without lawyers, without accusations, just mother and son?" I hesitated, remembering Mr. Harrington's warning, but also feeling that maternal pull that never quite disappears, no matter how much pain your child causes you. "We can talk on the porch," I said finally, stepping outside rather than inviting him in. Adrian looked terrible, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that appeared slept in. He paced the porch while I sat in Lawrence's old rocking chair. "This has gotten out of hand," he said. "I never wanted it to go this far. You're the one who escalated from forged documents to legal threats to a conservatorship filing," I pointed out. He ran his hands through his unkempt hair. "I'm desperate, and Mom, I owe people money. Dangerous people. They're threatening me, and I don't have anywhere else to turn. Gambling debts again," I presumed. I felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly suppressed by caution. There are resources for gambling addiction, Adrian. Places that can help. It's not just gambling," he interrupted. "I made some bad investments. Took out loans I can't repay. These people don't care about rehabilitation programs. They want their money, and they've made it clear what will happen if they don't get it." I studied my son's face, trying to separate truth from manipulation. He did look genuinely frightened. "How much?" I asked. €2 million, he said, his voice barely audible. "I need €2 million or—" He swallowed hard. "They've threatened to hurt Thomas if I don't pay." Ice flooded my veins. "They threatened Thomas?" Adrian nodded, eyes downcast. "I didn't want to tell you. I thought I could figure something out, but I'm out of options. That's why I came to you about Dad's money. Not because I'm greedy, but because I'm trying to protect my son, my grandson's safety. That was something I couldn't ignore, no matter how suspicious I was of Adrian's motives." "Have you gone to the police?" I asked. Adrian laughed bitterly. "These aren't the kind of people you report to the police, Mom. That would just make things worse." I rocked slowly, considering my options. I could give Adrian the money he claimed he needed, potentially saving Thomas from danger. But something wasn't adding up. "You said Jessica and Thomas are in Seattle now." "Yes," Adrian said quickly. "But these people have connections everywhere. Distance won't protect them." "When was the last time you spoke to Thomas?" Adrian hesitated, just a fraction too long. "Last week." He sounded scared. "Jessica is trying to keep him safe, but—" "That's strange," I interrupted, "because I spoke to Thomas 2 days ago, And he didn't mention any threats. In fact, he and Jessica are planning to fly out here next week to visit me and help with the court hearing. Adrian's expression froze, then crumpled. He'd been caught in a lie. The worst kind of lie. Using a child's safety to manipulate a grandmother's love. "You've been talking to them?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Yes, Adrian. Jessica called me after you first showed up with those forged papers. We've been in touch ever since." He slumped onto the porch steps, head in his hands. I didn't know what else to do. "Tell the truth, perhaps," I suggested, my voice harder than I'd intended. "Admit that you're in financial trouble because of your own choices, not because of some shadowy threats against your family." Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I do owe money. A lot of money. But not to dangerous people. To banks, credit card companies, the IRS. Less dramatic, but just as destructive." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine shame in his eyes. "I've made a mess of everything, Mom. My marriage, my business, my relationship with my son, with you and Dad." I felt the familiar tug of maternal concern, but kept my expression neutral. Why the conservatorship filing, Adrian? Why try to have me declared incompetent? He wouldn't meet my eyes. My lawyer said it was the best way to access the money, that if I could control your finances, I could pay off my debts and still leave you comfortable. And you didn't see anything wrong with that plan, with legally stripping your mother of her rights. Adrian had no answer, and we sat in silence as the evening shadows lengthened across the porch. Finally, I stood up. "I can't give you the money, Adrian. Not like this. Not when you've lied and manipulated and threatened. But," I took a deep breath, "I can help you find another way out of this mess, if you're willing to do the work." He looked up, confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "Withdraw the conservatorship petition. Get help for your gambling. Work with a financial advisor to make a plan for your debts. Show me you're serious about changing, and I'll consider helping you, not with cash, but with resources. Maybe a place to stay until you're back on your feet." Hope flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something harder. "And if I don't withdraw the petition, then we'll see each other in court," I said simply. "And based on what my lawyers tell me, you will lose." Adrian stood slowly. For a moment, I thought he might lash out, the old Adrian, full of rage and entitlement. Instead, he just looked tired. "I'll think about it," he said, and walked down the porch steps to his car. I watched him drive away, wondering if I'd reached him at all, or if he was already planning his next attempt to get what he wanted. Only time would tell which Adrian would show up at the courthouse, the son who might yet find redemption, or the stranger who saw me only as an obstacle to his inheritance. The next morning, I received a call from Mr. Harrington. "Adrian's lawyer has withdrawn the conservatorship petition," he announced, sounding both pleased and suspicious. "Just filed the paperwork an hour ago. Relief flooded through me. He's backing down. It appears so, though I wouldn't let your guard down completely. This could be a tactical retreat." After hanging up, I sat in Lawrence's study, trying to process this development. Had my words on the porch actually gotten through to Adrian? Or was this another manipulation, a way to lull me into a false sense of security before trying a different approach? The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. When I opened it, I found a delivery man holding a large envelope. "Dolores Ainsworth?" he asked. "This requires your signature." Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter from Adrian, along with several official-looking documents. I read the letter first. "Mom, I've withdrawn the conservatorship petition. You were right. It was a despicable thing to do to my own mother. I can't undo the hurt I've caused, but I hope this is a first step toward making amends. The enclosed documents are from my bankruptcy filing. Yes, I've finally admitted I can't dig myself out of this financial hole alone. My lawyer says it's the only way forward. I wanted you to see them so you'd know I'm serious about changing. I don't expect forgiveness. I probably don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your words yesterday made me realize what I've become. It's not who I want to be anymore. Adrian." The bankruptcy paperwork appeared genuine, listing debts totaling over 3 million euros to various creditors, credit card companies, banks, the IRS, and several individuals whose names I didn't recognize. Adrian hadn't been lying about the extent of his financial troubles, just about their nature. I called Jessica to share the news. "He actually filed for bankruptcy?" she asked, sounding as surprised as I felt. "That's unexpected. Adrian has always been too proud to admit financial failure. Do you think he's sincere about wanting to change?" I asked. Jessica was quiet for a moment. "I want to believe he is, for Thomas's sake, if nothing else. But Adrian has made promises before, Dolores. Many times." "I know," I sighed. "But this feels different. Filing for bankruptcy is a concrete step, not just words." "True," Jessica admitted. "Just be careful. Keep your guard up, at least until you see a consistent pattern of changed behavior." Thomas and Jessica arrived in Connecticut 3 days later. Seeing my grandson in person for the first time in 7 years brought tears to my eyes. At 16, he towered over me, his lanky frame reminiscent of Lawrence in his youth, but his gentle smile and the way he hugged me without hesitation were pure Thomas. "I'm sorry it's been so long, Grandma," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "We're together now," I replied, holding him tightly. "That's what matters." Jessica looked well, her brown hair now streaked with elegant gray, her face more lined, but still beautiful. She embraced me warmly, the awkwardness of our estrangement melting away in the face of our shared concern for Thomas and our complicated feelings about Adrian. Over dinner at my home that night, Thomas asked about his father. "Have you seen him since he withdrew the petition?" I shook my head. "Just the letter and bankruptcy papers." "Do you think—" Thomas hesitated. "Do you think he really wants to change?" The hope in my grandson's voice broke my heart. Despite everything Adrian had done, Thomas still yearned for a relationship with his father. "I think he's taking the first steps," I said carefully. "Real change takes time and consistent effort. But this is a start." Jessica reached across the table to squeeze her son's hand. "Your father loves you, Thomas. His problems have never been about not loving his family. They've been about not knowing how to love in a healthy way." The next morning, Mr. Harrington called again with unexpected news. "Adrian has requested a meeting," he said, "with you, me, and his new attorney. Not Vanessa Chambers, but someone from a reputable firm that specializes in bankruptcy and debt restructuring. He says he wants to make a formal apology and discuss how to move forward as a family." I hesitated. "What do you think?" "I think it's worth hearing him out," Mr. Harrington replied. "But in my office, on neutral ground, with legal representation present." The meeting was set for the following day. I invited Jessica to accompany me, and she agreed, though Thomas would stay behind at my house. "Are you nervous?" Jessica asked as we drove to Mr. Harrington's office. "Terrified," I admitted. "I want to believe Adrian is sincere, but I've been disappointed before." "We both have," she said softly. Adrian was already there when we arrived, seated beside an older gentleman who introduced himself as Robert Patel, Adrian's bankruptcy attorney. My son looked better than he had on my porch, clean-shaven in a simple but neat suit, with clear eyes that met mine directly. "Mom," he said, standing as we entered. "Jessica, thank you for coming." We all sat around Mr. Harrington's conference table, the atmosphere tense but not hostile. Adrian cleared his throat. "I've asked for this meeting to formally apologize," he began. "To both of you. My behavior has been inexcusable. The forgeries, the legal threats, the lies." He looked at Jessica. "The years of manipulations during and after our marriage." Then at me. "For the terrible things I said 7 years ago, and my recent attempt to take control of your finances." He took a deep breath. "I could blame it on gambling addiction, financial pressure, or my own insecurities. But the truth is simpler. I made choices. Bad ones. Selfish ones. And I've hurt the people I should have protected and cherished." Mr. Patel handed each of us a folder. "Adrian has prepared a formal statement acknowledging his actions, which you'll find inside. He's also requesting no financial assistance from either of you. That's important to his recovery process. What he would like, however, is the opportunity to rebuild relationships, particularly with Thomas, if and when you feel that's appropriate." I opened the folder and scanned the document inside. A detailed, unflinching account of Adrian's wrongdoings, with no attempts to minimize or justify them. The final paragraph read, "I make no claims on my father's estate, and acknowledge that my mother, Dolores Ainsworth, is the rightful and sole beneficiary of Lawrence Ainsworth's will. I will make no further attempts to access these funds through legal or other means, and I formally apologize for my previous attempts to do so. I ask only for the chance to demonstrate, through consistent actions rather than words, that I am committed to becoming the son, father, and ex-husband my family deserves. I looked up at Adrian, searching his face for signs of deception. What I saw instead surprised me: vulnerability, shame, and what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness or trust," he said quietly. "I know I need to earn those back, if it's even possible, but I had to start somewhere." Jessica spoke for the first time. "What about Thomas? He's been hurt the most by all this." Adrian nodded. "I know. If you and he are willing, I'd like to begin with supervised visits, maybe family therapy, whatever makes you both comfortable." "And your gambling?" I asked. "Toddy, your debts." "I've joined Gamblers Anonymous," Adrian replied. 3 meetings a week. As for the debts, the bankruptcy will discharge some, but not all. I've taken a job at an accounting firm, entry level, nothing glamorous, but steady income. I'll be paying what I can for years to come. The meeting continued for another hour, with Adrian answering our questions directly and without defensiveness. When it was over, I felt cautiously hopeful, not ready to fully trust, but willing to leave the door open for redemption. As we prepared to leave, Adrian handed me a small box. "This was Dad's," he said. "I found it when I was cleaning out my apartment. It must have gotten mixed in with my things years ago." Inside was Lawrence's pocket watch, the one his father had given him, which we'd thought was lost during our last move. The sight of it, this small treasure returned, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. Adrian nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything." For the first time since his return, I believed him. The next few weeks brought a cautious rebuilding of family bonds. Adrian began attending family therapy sessions with Thomas and Jessica, while maintaining his Gamblers Anonymous meetings and his new job. I kept a careful distance at first, protecting myself from potential disappointment while observing the changes in my son. Thomas flourished under the renewed family connections. Having both his grandmother and father back in his life seemed to fill a void he'd been carrying for years. He stayed with me for 2 weeks before returning to Seattle with Jessica, promising to visit again during Christmas break. Adrian and I began with short, supervised visits, usually with Jessica or Mr. Harrington present. Gradually, these evolved into one-on-one conversations, typically over coffee at a local cafe rather than in the privacy of my home. I wasn't ready for that level of vulnerability yet. During one of these meetings, about a month after our formal reconciliation, Adrian asked about the inheritance. "I'm not asking for anything," he clarified quickly, seeing my expression tighten. "I'm just curious. What do you plan to do with it? That's a lot of money for one person." I stirred my tea, considering how much to share. "I'm still figuring that out," I said finally. "Some will go to Thomas, of course, for college and to give him a good start in life. Some to charitable causes your father and I both believed in." Adrian nodded. "That sounds like Dad, always thinking of others." "He thought of you too," I said quietly. "Even after everything." Adrian looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then decided the truth might help his recovery. "Your father knew you had problems with money. That's why he left everything to me. Not to punish you, but to protect you from yourself. He hoped that someday you'd overcome your demons. And then," I took a deep breath, "he left a letter for you. Asked me to give it to you only when I believed you were truly committed to change." Adrian's eyes widened. "A letter? For me?" "Yes. I have it at home. Do you—" His voice faltered. "Do you think I'm ready to read it?" I studied my son's face. The past weeks had shown consistent effort on his part. The therapy, the steady job, the meetings, all suggested a genuine commitment to change. And there was something else, a humility that had never been part of Adrian's character before. "Yes," I said softly. "I think you are." That evening, Adrian came to my home for the first time since the confrontation over the forged documents. I invited him into Lawrence's study and retrieved a sealed envelope from the desk drawer. "He wrote this a week before he died," I explained, handing it to Adrian. "He said he'd been working on it for months, trying to find the right words. Adrian stared at the envelope, his father's distinctive handwriting spelling out his name. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. I started to leave, to give him privacy, but he shook his head. "Stay, please." Together, we sat in Lawrence's study, as Adrian read his father's final words to him. I watched his face change. Shock, pain, grief, and finally something like acceptance washing over his features. When he finished, he handed the letter to me. "He knew," Adrian whispered. "All along, he knew exactly what I was going through, even when I wouldn't talk to him." I read the letter, though I already knew its contents. Lawrence had shared it with me before sealing it. "Adrian, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I've left this world, and you've taken the first real steps toward finding yourself again. Your mother wouldn't give you this letter otherwise, and I trust her judgment completely. Son, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, not during these 7 years of silence, not during the darkest moments when you pushed us away. A parent's love doesn't work that way. It doesn't recognize estrangements or arguments or harsh words. It simply persists. I understand addiction. My own father fought it, alcohol rather than gambling, but the pattern is the same. I watched it destroy him, which is why I've been so afraid for you. Perhaps I pushed too hard, tried too forcefully to save you from his fate. If so, I'm sorry. Our attempts to help sometimes do more harm than good, even when they come from love. You may wonder about my decision regarding the inheritance. It wasn't about punishment or favoritism. Money is like water, life-giving in proper amounts, devastating in a flood. For someone struggling with addiction, sudden wealth can be that flood. I couldn't risk leaving you a fortune that might hasten your destruction, even though it broke my heart to make that choice. But I never gave up hope that you would find your way back, that the boy who once had such a generous heart and brilliant mind would re-emerge from beneath the weight of addiction and resentment. If you're reading this, that journey has begun. What I want for you isn't measured in euros or properties. It's the peace that comes from honest work, healthy relationships, and the knowledge that you're living with integrity. Find that first. The rest, including financial security, will follow in time and in ways that won't threaten your recovery. I have one request. Be kind to your mother. She has loved you with a fierceness I've never seen matched, even when that love meant letting you go, and be the father Thomas deserves. It's never too late to rebuild that bond. I regret that I won't see the man you're becoming, but I leave this world believing in your capacity for change and growth. You are stronger than your worst mistakes. Adrian, remember that. With eternal love, Dad. Adrian wiped tears from his face when I finished reading. I was so angry at him. At both of you. I convinced myself you were the problem, not me. That if you'd just given me what I wanted, everything would be fine. He shook his head. I was like a child having a tantrum. Addiction distorts everything, I said gently. Your thinking, your priorities, your perception of who cares about you. I wanted to blame everyone else, Adrian admitted. It was easier than looking in the mirror. We sat in silence for a while, the presence of Lawrence seeming to fill the room, bringing a sense of completion to a circle that had been broken for too long. What happens now? Adrian finally asked. I reached for his hand, taking it in mine for the first time since his return. We keep rebuilding, one day at a time. As autumn deepened into winter, our family's healing continued, fragile but persistent. Adrian maintained his recovery program and his job, gradually earning back trust through consistent actions rather than promises or grand gestures. Thomas visited again during Thanksgiving, and the sight of my son and grandson together, awkward but trying, filled me with a quiet joy Lawrence would have treasured. The inheritance remained solely in my control, as Lawrence had intended, but as I watched Adrian's progress, I began to consider how it might eventually benefit him in ways that would support rather than undermine his recovery. One evening in early December, as I sorted through Lawrence's papers, I discovered an old business plan he'd drafted years ago, but never pursued, a foundation focused on addiction recovery services for families. Lawrence had envisioned a program that would address not just the addict's needs, but the complex web of relationships affected by addiction. The idea resonated deeply. What if Lawrence's money could create something meaningful, something that might help families avoid the pain ours had experienced? The next day, I invited Adrian to dinner to discuss it. A foundation. he repeated after I'd outlined the concept. Using Dad's money to help families dealing with addiction? Your father had started planning it before his health declined, I explained. I think he hoped someday you might be involved, once you'd found your way to recovery. Adrian was silent for a long moment. I wouldn't know the first thing about running something like that. Neither would I admitted. But we could learn, or hire people who do know, while providing the vision and purpose. You'd trust me with this? Adrian asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Not immediately, I said honestly. But eventually, yes. You have first-hand experience with addiction that could make the Foundation's work more authentic and effective, and it might be a way for you to transform your struggles into something that helps others. Adrian stared into his coffee. Dad would have liked that idea, using his money to help people avoid what happened to us. I think so too, I said softly. I'd want to finish my first year of recovery first, Adrian said, surprising me with his caution. Get more solid ground under me before taking on something like that. His restraint, so unlike the impulsive Adrian who had shown up at my door with forged papers, was perhaps the strongest evidence yet of genuine change. That seems wise, I agreed. In the meantime, I'll consult with Mr. Harrington about the legal structure and start preliminary planning. As Christmas approached, Jessica and Thomas returned to Connecticut, this time staying in a hotel rather than with me, a small sign of the shifting family dynamics as Adrian became more involved. We planned our first family Christmas dinner in 7 years, to be held at my home on Christmas Eve. I was nervous about hosting, about whether old tensions might resurface, about whether our fragile rebuilding could withstand the emotional weight of holiday expectations. But Thomas's excitement about having both his father and grandmother at the same table overrode my anxieties. The day before Christmas Eve, Adrian called with an unexpected request. Would it be all right if I bring someone to dinner? He asked hesitantly. A friend from my Gamblers Anonymous group. Her name is Eleanor. She doesn't have family in town. And, he paused, she's become important to me. Of course she's welcome, I said, surprised but pleased that Adrian had made a meaningful connection. One born in recovery, rather than in the chaotic world of gambling. Christmas Eve arrived with a light snow that coated Rosewood in a pristine white blanket. I prepared Lawrence's traditional roast beef. Thomas helped with the Yorkshire pudding, and Jessica arranged a magnificent centerpiece for the dining table. The house, which had felt so empty after Lawrence's death, now hummed with life and nervous energy. Adrian arrived with Eleanor, a soft-spoken woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. She shook my hand firmly, thanking me for including her. Adrian speaks of you with such admiration, she said. I feel like I already know you. As we gathered around the table, I felt Lawrence's absence keenly, the empty chair at the head of the table a reminder of all that had changed. But looking at the faces around me, Thomas, growing into a thoughtful young man, Jessica, who had found the strength to leave an unhealthy relationship, Adrian, fighting his way toward redemption, and Eleanor, whose quiet presence seemed to ground my son, I also felt profound gratitude. Thomas, sensing the emotional undercurrent, raised his glass. To Grandpa, he said, who I think would have been really happy to see us all together. To Lawrence, I echoed, my voice catching. As we ate, conversation flowed more easily than I had dared to hope. Thomas talked about his college applications, his excitement about engineering programs. Jessica shared news of a promotion at her Seattle firm. Eleanor spoke about her work as a high school counselor, her own 5 years of recovery, and the peace she'd found in starting over. Adrian remained quieter than the others, listening intently, offering comments when appropriate, but mostly watching with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in decades. Contentment, unmarred by the restless hunger for more that had driven him for so long. After dessert, as Thomas and Jessica cleared the table, Adrian asked if we could speak privately. We stepped into Lawrence's study, the room where so much of our recent history had unfolded. I have something for you, Adrian said, handing me a small wrapped package. It's not much, but inside was a hand-carved wooden frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before. Lawrence holding infant Thomas, with Adrian beside them, all 3 Ainsworth men captured in a moment of perfect joy. Jessica found it when she was going through old photos, Adrian explained. I don't even remember it being taken, but I thought you might want it. Tears welled in my eyes as I traced the faces in the photograph. It's perfect, I whispered. Thank you. Adrian's hands fidgeted nervously. There's something else I wanted to say. About the foundation idea. Yes, I've been thinking about it a lot. About what Dad would have wanted. About how to make something meaningful from all this. He took a deep breath. I'd like to be involved eventually, but not as a leader or decision maker. Not yet. Maybe someday when I've proven myself. But for now, I'd just like to help shape the vision. Maybe share my experience if it would help others. His humility, his willingness to earn his place rather than demand it, told me more about his recovery than any therapy report or sobriety chip could have. I think that's perfect, I said. We'll build it together, step by step. Adrian nodded, relief evident in his expression. One more thing, he said. Eleanor and I, it's still early, but it's serious. She knows everything. About the gambling, the debts, what I tried to do to you. She still sees something in me worth loving. His voice broke slightly. I didn't think that was possible anymore. I always saw something worth loving in you, Adrian, I said softly, even at your worst. That's what parents do. He embraced me then. This son who had caused so much pain, but who was finding his way back to the person he was meant to be. And as I held him, I felt Lawrence's presence, not gone, just transformed into the love that surrounded us, into the possibility of healing that had emerged from our darkest moments. We rejoined the others in the living room, where Thomas was regaling Eleanor with stories of his robotics team's latest project. Jessica caught my eye, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I nodded, letting her know everything was all right, better than all right. Not perfect, not completely healed, but moving in the right direction. One step at a time, one day at a time, the only way any of us ever truly find our way forward. Spring arrived in Rosewood, bringing renewal to our family. Thomas had been accepted to Cornell with a scholarship I quietly supplemented from Lawrence's inheritance. Adrian celebrated 1 year of sobriety and received a promotion at work. His relationship with Eleanor provided stability he'd never found before. The Ainsworth Family Foundation for Recovery Support was taking shape, with professional management and a board of specialists. I served as chairperson, with Adrian attending as an observer, his insights valued but his official role still limited by mutual agreement. In April, Mr. Harrington informed me that Vanessa Chambers, the attorney who had represented Adrian, had been disbarred for ethical violations in multiple cases. She made a habit of helping clients pursue questionable claims against elderly relatives, he explained. When I shared this with Adrian, he accepted full responsibility despite her influence. I was still responsible for my choices, he said, but knowing myself now, I probably would have gambled away whatever I got. The foundation is a better legacy. As summer approached, Jessica was offered a partnership at her law firm in Seattle. During one of our regular calls, she suggested, "What if Thomas stayed with you for the summer? He could work with Adrian on the foundation before college starts." The idea of having my grandson for the summer filled me with joy. Thomas arrived in June with 3 overstuffed suitcases and endless enthusiasm. At 17, he stood taller than Adrian now, with Lawrence's thoughtful eyes and analytical mind. He divided his time between the foundation, where he helped develop a website and social media presence, and my home, where we spent evenings on the porch swing, talking about everything from quantum physics to his hopes for college. One evening, as we sorted through old family albums, Thomas asked, "Do you think Dad has really changed, Grandma? For good?" I considered the question carefully. Recovery isn't a destination, it's a daily choice. Your father is making that choice consistently now, but it will always require vigilance. Mom says I shouldn't get my hopes up too much. Your mother is wise to be cautious, I acknowledged. But I've seen something in Adrian these past months that was missing before. Humility. That gives me hope. In August, as Thomas's departure for college approached, Adrian invited us both to dinner at his and Eleanor's modest apartment. The meal was simple, but prepared with care, and afterward, Adrian handed Thomas an envelope. "This is my contribution to your education," he said. "It's not much compared to what Grandma has provided, but it's from money I earned, not borrowed or gambled." Inside was a check for $5,000, a significant amount from Adrian's modest salary. Thomas embraced his father, the awkwardness of their early reunions replaced by genuine affection. Later that week, Mr. Harrington helped me finalize the Ainsworth Family Foundation's endowment, ensuring its work would continue for decades. I also created a trust for Thomas that would provide for his education and a sensible start in life, without the burden of sudden wealth. For Adrian, I established a separate trust that would activate only after 5 years of continued recovery, with additional milestones at 10 and 15 years. Not the lump sum he'd once demanded, but a structured support system that honored his progress while acknowledging the ongoing nature of recovery. On Thomas's last night before leaving for Cornell, our family gathered at my home for dinner. Adrian and Eleanor, Jessica, who had flown in for the occasion, Thomas, and me. As we sat around the table Lawrence had built, I felt his absence keenly, but also his enduring presence in the family he'd loved. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass, "to second chances, to healing, and to the journey ahead, whatever it may bring." As we clinked glasses, I caught Adrian's eye across the table. In that moment, I saw not the angry man who had arrived at my door with forged papers and demands, but my son, imperfect, still fragile in his recovery, but finding his way back to the person Lawrence and I had always believed he could be. The inheritance that had nearly torn us apart had, in its own way, brought us together, not through wealth divided, but through difficult truths faced and painful growth embraced. Lawrence would have said that was worth more than all the millions in the world. And sitting there, surrounded by the family we were rebuilding, I knew he was right. Some wounds would never fully heal. Some trust would take years to rebuild completely. But as I watched Thomas laugh at something Eleanor said, as I noted the clear eyes and steady hands of my son in recovery, as I felt the weight of my own journey from grief to resilience, I understood that this imperfect, hard-won peace, was the true inheritance Lawrence had left us. Not 18 million euros, but the capacity to face our darkest moments and still choose love, still choose family, still choose to begin again. And that was enough.